wealth, a cascade, like a waterfall of leads that come directly from that video.
Retired FBI Special Agent Lance Lysing says the video images could be the key to helping investigators break the case.
We're going to hope that a family member, a friend, somebody who knows that person is going to report them. That's the tip you need.
The Pima County Sheriff's Department says thousands of new tips have been received since the footage was released. A neighbor says authorities also questioned her about her home surveillance cameras, particularly from the night Guthrie disappeared.
The evening of January 31, 2026, began with the kind of mundane warmth that defines a close-knit family. Nancy Guthrie, the matriarch of a family constantly in the public eye, sat down for dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law, Tommaso Shani. There were no omens, no shadows. By all accounts, it was a quiet night of mahjong and conversation in their Tucson neighborhood. When Tommaso pulled his car into Nancy's driveway to drop her off, he watched the 84-year-old, who relied on a pacemaker and daily medication, walk safely to her door. It was the last time any member of the Guthrie family would see her. By the next morning, the house was a crime scene. When Nancy failed to show up for her Sunday church service, the alarm was raised. What investigators found was not a simple disappearance, but a chillingly precise abduction. There were small droplets of blood on the porch, a silent testament to a struggle that the neighbors never heard. The initial stir in the media didn't focus on the shadows, but on the man who had last seen her. Because Tommaso Shani was the final link in the timeline, the last seen, rule of thumb in criminal investigations turned the spotlight harshly on him. Rumors began to swirl through the digital ether. Why was he so calm? Why did the intruder in the footage seem to have his build? For the first 2 weeks of February, the Guthrie family faced a dual nightmare: the loss of their mother and a public trial by social media. But as the FBI moved in, the evidence began to tell a story that moved away from the dinner table and into the dark desert surrounding Tucson. As the sun crested over the Santa Catalina Mountains on the morning of February 1, 2026, the quiet cul-de-sac where Nancy Guthrie lived was transformed into a high-stakes forensic theater. While early internet speculation fixated on the last person to see her, the FBI's Technical Crimes Unit was busy extracting a much more chilling narrative from the digital ether. The stir that had initially centered on the son-in-law began to pivot toward a more professional, more calculated threat when a piece of grainy, high-definition doorbell footage was recovered from a neighbor's house 3 doors down. The footage, timestamped at 11:14 p.m., less than an hour after Tommaso Shani had watched Nancy walk to her door, captured a figure that investigators would later describe as ghost-like. The intruder was not a panicked amateur. Dressed in a dark, heavy tactical jacket despite the mild Tucson evening, the individual moved with a disturbing fluidity. The most striking detail, however, was the mask, a high-quality silicone prosthetic that obscured every identifying facial feature, designed to mimic a generic elderly male. This wasn't a crime of passion or a family dispute gone wrong. This was the hallmark of a targeted abduction. The circle that investigators began to scrutinize wasn't one of blood relatives, but one of proximity and opportunity. This masked figure appeared to have intimate knowledge of Nancy's routine. The FBI focused on a specific piece of evidence left behind in the struggle near the side gate: a black Ozark Trail backpack. Inside, technicians found items that suggested the abductor had been watching the house for days: a map of the local trail system with handwritten notations, and a discarded receipt from a local convenience store dated 48 hours prior. The evidence began to paint a picture of a watcher, someone who may have been part of the service circles surrounding the affluent neighborhood. While the public hungrily consumed rumors about family dynamics, the forensic truth was found in the DNA on that backpack. It was male. It was foreign to the Guthrie family tree, and it belonged to someone who knew exactly when the house would be most vulnerable. The shadow at the threshold wasn't a family member. It was a predator who had been hiding in plain sight. The forensic narrative of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance shifted from the physical threshold of her home to the invisible architecture of the cellular network. As investigators combed through the data, they discovered that the shadow caught on camera wasn't just a physical presence, it was a digital ghost. While the initial stir surrounding the son-in-law's circle persisted in the court of public opinion, the FBI's cyber action team was quietly tracking a series of pings from a burner phone that had been activated only 48 hours before the abduction. This device didn't belong to any family member, yet it had tethered to the cell towers surrounding Nancy's Tucson home with haunting frequency in the days leading up to January 31. The data revealed a predatory pattern. The phone had moved in a rhythmic loop from the outskirts of the city to the quiet cul-de-sac, suggesting a dry run of the kidnapping. On the night Nancy vanished, the device went dark at 10:45 p.m., exactly 30 minutes before the masked figure appeared on the neighbor's doorbell camera. It didn't resurface until 3:12 a.m., pinging off a tower near the base of the Tortolita Mountains, miles away from the suburban comfort of the Guthrie residence. This was the moment the investigation truly pivoted. The evidence wasn't pointing to a heated argument in a living room. It was pointing to a calculated extraction into the high desert. I want to welcome you to the channel. We look for the truth in the shadows of cold cases and closed files. If you value this kind of deep dive investigation, please consider subscribing. And as we begin this journey together, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Whether you're joining us from the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world, leave a comment below. It helps us remember that these stories, though local, touch hearts across the globe. Your engagement helps us keep the spotlight on cases that might otherwise fade into the dark. The circle of suspicion began to widen far beyond the Guthrie family tree and into the transient workforce of the Pima County area. The burner phone's trail led to a small convenience store where the Ozark Trail backpack, found at the scene, had been purchased. Surveillance from that store showed a man who matched the height of the masked intruder, but his face was obscured by a low-hanging baseball cap. He paid in cash. He spoke to no one. He was a professional at staying invisible. As the FBI began to map these pings against the local trail systems, they realized the abductor hadn't used a primary vehicle for the escape. Instead, they had likely utilized the rugged, unmonitored desert washes that crisscross the region. The truth in the shadows was becoming clear. The perpetrator wasn't a disgruntled relative, but a watcher who had integrated themselves into the service-heavy environment of Nancy's neighborhood, perhaps a former contractor or a local vagrant with an intimate knowledge of the terrain. The digital breadcrumbs were there, but they led into a wilderness where technology often fails, and only the most diligent investigation can survive. As the search for Nancy Guthrie entered its second grueling week in mid-February 2026, the investigation took a sharp turn away from the dinner table and into the rugged terrain of the Sonoran Desert. For days, the public's attention had been weaponized by online speculation, with many pointing fingers at those closest to her. But the dirt and the brush of Pima County were about to provide a different kind of testimony. Roughly 2 miles from Nancy's front porch, search teams discovered a single, discarded black glove lying in a field near a dusty roadside.
Of the home, courtesy of our drone, of the front door of Nancy's property. Once they're able to do that, it then takes about 24 hours for it to go into CODIS. CODIS is that massive database, that criminal database of all the DNA profiles that are around the entire country that they can try to go for a match. I'll tell you this, I've done a lot of DNA stories in my life, and as a reporter here, if there's not a match, here's the important update. There are teams of people, as we look at the memorial that's being left for Nancy here with the flowers, the signs in front of her door. There are teams of volunteers out there that are absolute pros. They can take that DNA.
It wasn't just any piece of litter. It was a match to the glove seen on the masked intruder in the chilling one, 6:47 a.m. doorbell footage. This discovery was the moment the stir regarding the family circle began to lose its grip on the factual timeline. When the FBI's forensic lab processed the glove, they found a distinct profile of unknown male DNA. By February 15, preliminary results confirmed that this DNA did not match any member of the Guthrie family, including her son-in-law, Tommaso Shani, or any other relatives. This genetic ghost was an outsider, a person of average build, approximately 59 to 510, who had moved through the night with a holstered weapon and a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. The presence of this DNA changed the scope of the circle entirely. Investigators were no longer looking for a motive born of domestic tension, but for a predator who had likely scouted the neighborhood for weeks. The FBI began utilizing investigative genetic genealogy, a high-tech tool used in cold cases, to cross-reference this unknown profile against public databases. This wasn't a crime hidden within the family. It was a crime brought to them by a stranger who had left behind a singular, damning piece of evidence. While the desert heat continued to rise, the cold, hard data from that glove provided the most significant lead yet, shifting the hunt toward a suspect who remained, for now, a faceless shadow in the system. Sonoran Brush, the investigation entered a surreal new phase, the arrival of the ransom notes. This was the moment the stir transformed from a local search into an international digital manhunt. Between February 3 and February 9, 2026, a series of chilling communiques were sent to media outlets like TMZ and local Tucson stations. These weren't traditional letters composed of magazine clippings. They were sophisticated, technologically shielded demands for $6 million in Bitcoin. The level of detail in these notes sent shockwaves through the Pima County Sheriff's Department. The anonymous sender didn't just ask for money. They proved they were inside the home. They referenced the specific damage to the side gate and, most tellingly, mentioned Nancy's Apple Watch and the exact status of her pacemaker. This was the factual evidence that convinced the FBI this wasn't just a hoax by internet trolls. The kidnappers were using the blockchain's semi-anonymous nature to create a financial fortress, demanding that the Guthrie family transfer the funds to a verified wallet address by a 5:00 p.m. deadline on February 9. The tension reached a breaking point when Savannah Guthrie and her siblings Annie and Cameron released a heartbreaking video on Instagram. Sitting hand in hand, they addressed the shadows directly. "We received your message and we understand," Savannah said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "This is very valuable to us and we will pay." The circle of the crime now involved high-level cyberforensics. While the public debated whether the family should pay, the FBI was busy mapping the Bitcoin wallet. They knew that while Bitcoin is difficult to stop, it is incredibly easy to track once it moves to an exchange. The $6 million demand wasn't just a threat, it was a digital breadcrumb. Yet, as the deadline passed, the wallet remained at a zero balance. The silence that followed was more deafening than the demands, leaving investigators to wonder, was the money the goal, or was it merely a distraction from a much darker purpose? As the search for Nancy Guthrie entered its second week in mid-February 2026, the investigation finally broke out of the digital world of ransom pings and into the physical realm of high-speed chases and SWAT raids. The stir that had initially surrounded Nancy's family was eclipsed by a tangible lead, a mysterious, unmarked white van. Neighbors in the foothills of Tucson, now on high alert, reported seeing the full-sized vehicle idling near Nancy's home in the days preceding the January 31 abduction. One neighbor, Brett McIntyre, noted it had no company markings, a red flag in a neighborhood where independent contractors usually display their trade. On the night of Tuesday, February 11, the tension reached a boiling point. Acting on a tip and data from the digital pings discussed in Chapter 3, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, backed by the FBI, initiated a high-risk traffic stop south of Tucson. A man, later identified as a delivery driver named Carlos, was detained at gunpoint. Simultaneously, a court-authorized search warrant was executed an hour south in Rio Rico, Arizona. SWAT teams descended on a residential property, while forensic investigators focused on a white van and a gray Range Rover found in a nearby Culver's parking lot. The scene was chaotic. Flashbangs echoed through the Rio Rico air as investigators searched for any sign of the 84-year-old grandmother. However, the raid produced a complicated set of results. While the vehicles were impounded and meticulously swept for DNA, the man detained, Carlos, insisted on his innocence, claiming he was simply working his delivery route. By the next morning, he was released without charges, leaving the public and the media in a frenzy of confusion. Was this another dead end, or was it a tactical maneuver by the FBI to flush out the real shadow? The circle of the crime was now shifting toward Rio Rico, a border-adjacent town that suggested a much more dangerous trajectory for Nancy's disappearance. The blood on the porch and the discarded glove were the beginning. The white van was the vehicle of the crime. But as the suspects were released and the van sat empty in the impound lot, the question remained: if the driver wasn't the kidnapper, who was he working for? As the investigation stretched into its third week, the most scientific and harrowing evidence emerged not from a witness, but from Nancy's own body. Nancy lived with a pacemaker, a device designed to keep her heart in rhythm, but in the world of forensic investigation, it became a silent witness. On February 15, 2026, the FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department revealed a detail that chilled the public. Nancy's pacemaker was designed to sync automatically with a companion app on her iPhone. The logs showed a final, stable sync at 2:28 a.m. on February 1. Minutes later, the connection was severed, not because the device failed, but because Nancy was moved out of the 10-foot Bluetooth range of her phone, which was left behind in her bedroom. This established an ironclad timeline for the abduction, proving that the shadow caught on camera at 1:47 a.m. had spent nearly 40 minutes inside the home before extracting her. In a desperate bid to locate her, authorities deployed a signal sniffer, a high-tech electromagnetic sensor mounted on the skids of a Pima County Sheriff's helicopter. For 3 days, the aircraft flew low, methodical grids over the Tortolita Mountains and the desert washes of Rio Rico. They were hunting for a specific, low-power electronic pulse in the vast silence of the Arizona wilderness. The stir intensified as experts debated the survival window for an 84-year-old in the desert without her high blood pressure medication. While the signal sniffer picked up various electronic noises, none were the heartbeat they were looking for. The silence in the static was a heavy blow to the family. Yet, Sheriff Chris Nanos remained resolute, stating that while they had no proof of life, they had no proof of death either. The hunt moved forward, fueled by the hope that the very technology keeping Nancy's heart beating might eventually lead them to her location. By February 18, 2026, the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has reached a critical, high-stakes stalemate. The early stir and the cloud of suspicion that once hung over her family, specifically her son-in-law and children, has been formally and finally dissolved. In a definitive statement, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos made it clear that the Guthries are victims, not suspects. The forensic gaze of the FBI has shifted entirely toward a nameless entity now known to the public as the Watcher. The evidence has culminated in a chilling profile. A man approximately 59 to 510 tall, possessing the technical skill to tamper with high-end security systems, and the cold calculation to abduct an 84-year-old woman in the dead of night. The most significant physical lead remains the 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack and the discarded glove found 2 miles from the scene. On February 17, the FBI confirmed a major update. While the DNA on that glove belongs to an unknown male, It yielded no match in the CODIS national database. This means the abductor is someone who has likely stayed under the radar of the criminal justice system until now. In response, the FBI has increased the reward for information to $100,000, and investigators have turned to investigative genetic genealogy to trace the Watcher's family tree through public DNA databases. As Savannah Guthrie remains away from the Today Show desk, the world watches the Arizona desert with bated breath. The investigation is no longer about family secrets. It is a race against time, a hunt for a shadow, and a desperate search for a heartbeat in the silence of the Sonoran night. The case remains open, the search remains active, and the truth is still out there, hidden somewhere in the vast, rugged expanse of Pima County.